Hi everyone, so today we're going to be talking about exam FM topic 3, which is all about loans. If you haven't really watched the other videos or if you haven't gone over annuities and time value of money concepts, that's actually critical in understanding the concepts in loans because a lot of the principles about time value of money and accumulating, discounting, even annuities is actually very applicable here. So first, we want to really have a solid foundational understanding of that before we actually dive into this. So loans are all about when you can think of this from your annuities or time value of money section. Loans are all about when we borrow some amount of money and then it accumulates over time in value and in interest. So for example, we have this time value diagram here. You can think of the original loan that we get as L or RAN, and then we're going to be repaying that loan. And in this case, level payments, which are equal payments, or in other problems, it could be non-level payments in which we do have to do some sort of adjustments there. So you can think of this as the loan, and obviously as time one, time two, it's going to accumulate in value all the way until the end of the duration, until the end of the time. And we can think of this loan, right, as RREN, our annuity immediate. And now we have five different concepts that we'll go over when it relates to these types of loans. First, a duration. Duration is simply the time step at which the payment is occurring. Payment refers to the payment amount that is occurring. In this example, or in this sort of chart you see here, the payments are level, but that might not also always be the case. There may be sometimes where you may have the principal that is actually level and where the payment amount actually differs. So we have payment, we have interest due, which is essentially after each time you make the payment, what's the interest at that time period? And we'll go a bit more into what that means. Then we have principal repaid. This is how much of the original loan amount that you're paying at each payment. So each payment that you pay is broken down into two categories. So in this time diagram here, you can see that at each time step, when you pay an amount R, that amount is split out between two categories: the payment that you're making for the interest and the payment that you're making for the principal amount that's repaid, or the amount that you're paying back for the original loan. So that's a fundamental concept that we need to understand, is that these are, you can think of this as an annuity where you're making a fixed payment at every interval, or like not a non-fixed payment, but you're making some sort of payment at each fixed interval. And each of those payments can be broken down into two categories: the amount of payment for the interest due, the interest that you've earned, and the amount of payment for the principal. And so that's the first concept that we'll go over, is the interest due. You can think of the interest due as, say you're starting off at 1,100,000, interest is 10%, right? You're just going to multiply that by 0.1, right? 0.1. And then that around 10,000 is the interest that you've accumulated over that, right, 1 year. Then you're going to make some payment, and then you're going to accumulate interest from that outstanding balance. So really the interest due is dependent upon the previous outstanding balance. So the formula is this, is the interest rate times the previous outstanding balance. Before I actually dive into the formulas relating, that outstanding balance refers to the amount that is left to be paid on the original loan. So you can think of this as the present value of the future payments, or you can think of this as the amount of principal repayments that we need in order to complete the loan. So that those are two ways you can think about outstanding balance, right? One is the future value of the present value of the future payments, or you can think of them as what is the remaining loan that still needs to be repaid. And so we have these pretty much four main criteria sections: payment, interest due, principal repaid, and outstanding balance. The outstanding balance initially is always going to be RAN, simple annuity concept, immediate annuity. Then after at each time step, it's going to decrease by 1. So right, we can see here, right, RAN is the initial present value. Then as we get the R payment, right, then we have RAN minus 1. Then we have RAN minus 2, RAN minus 3, and so on until we're at the very end, after the last payment, where we're at 0. That represents that we have paid out the entire loan. So that's outstanding balance. You can see that this is also called the prospective method because what it does is it's discounting all of the other payments, right? It's the present value of the future payments. The retrospective method is it's accumulating payments. So there's another method to calculate outstanding balance. Both of these should get you the same amount, but in this case, you can think of the outstanding balance as, let's say we're at time 3. Let's say we're at time 3, our loan has accumulated L times 1 plus I to the third, or in any time t to the t, minus what we have accumulated so far, right? Or what our payments have, the payments that we have made, that is going to be minus RS3. So this LI plus 1 plus I the third, that refers to the accumulation of the loan, and the RS3 refers to the accumulation of the payment amounts that you've made. So essentially, it's going to essentially either way, either method that you use, you should get the same amount, and that refers to the future present value of the future payments, or the amount that still needs to that is remaining to be paid of the original loan amount. And so that's that. We covered that. And then a pattern for this is that it is always going to be the outstanding balance at the next duration or the next time step is always going to be subtracted by the principal repaid. So from RAN to RAN minus 1, you're going to be subtracting the principal repaid was for duration 1. So you're going to be subtracting RVN. Then on the next time step, you're going to be subtracting RV to the n minus 1, subtracting by RV n minus 2, and so on. And so yeah, we went over that. This is how much of the loan that still needs to be paid out. It also referred to the present value of future payments. Principal repaid now is, if you sum up all of your principal repaid, that should get you to the original loan amount, because this is how much of the current payment that you're making at each duration is for the original loan amount. So in this case, if we're paying R at time 1, that refers to we're paying R times 1 minus B to the n for the interest that's due, and we're paying the remainder RVN to the for the original loan amount. So if we add up all of those principal repayments, we should get to the original loan amount. And if we add up all of the interest that we have accumulated, that should get us to the total interest, that the total amount that we paid just for interest. So you sort of like I mentioned before, we sort of put these into two different categories. We have a payment R, and we've split those into the payment that we have allocated for just the interest portion, and the payment that we have allocated just for the original loan amount that we're trying to pay out. So that's actually one of the fundamental equations you need to know, because a lot of times the payment structure is going to change, but you're not going to have a constant R payment. And so one of the fundamental concepts you need to wrap your mind around is these three things. So the first thing is that the payment is always going to be equal to the interest due plus the principal repaid, plus the principal repaid. So the payment amount rate, and it's not going to be fixed. It may not be fixed. This is just in the case, this entire chart that you see, that it's just in the case if there's level payments. So there's a fixed amount of payment that you're paying at each time step. But that could not be the case. You could have 200, 300, or something like that. But the one thing that should always remain constant, the same, is that the payment will always equal the interest due plus the principal repaid. So it's the sum of these two buckets over here, as you can see. The next thing is that the interest that is due is always going to equal the interest rate times the previous outstanding balance. So in this case, for duration 1, the interest that's due is going to equal I, as you can see in this equation, times the previous balance. Now, this formula you see here is actually a derivation from the idea that, okay, these are going to be level payments. So this formula you should only use when you know 100% that these are actually level payments. If you don't know if these are non-level payments and they're not fixed, you want to get the interest due, you always want to resort to the fact that, okay, it's the interest rate times what the previous outstanding balance is. To get the principal the amount of principal, that the amount of payment that you're making just for the loan itself, you could use RV to the n, but you should only use that if you know that that these payments are actually level. Another way you can do that is through subtracting the interest due from the payment, as we know that both of these should add to the payment itself. So this is, again, these are the three ideas or the equations you should remember for any, both level and non-level payments. And so interest due equals interest rate times BT minus one, the previous outstanding balance. Now, to get to the next outstanding balance, in the next time step, you, as I mentioned before, and this is fixed for all level and the non-level payments, is you subtract by the principal repaid, right? Because the principal repaid represents the portion of the payment that you're making for the original loan amount. So for each time step, you're subtracting the principal repaid. So that's what we have here, right? The outstanding balance at time t is equal to the previous outstanding balance minus what are the amount that you paid for that loan or the principal repaid at time step t. And let's go over a couple of the other things here. Yeah, like I said, another main thing is just knowing that all of the principal repaid should add to the original loan amount if you sum all of the principal repayments up, and the last term of the outstanding balance should be zero because that represents that you've paid out the original loan. And then, right, outstanding balance is also the present value of future payments. That's actually another concept you need to remember just for non-level payments, that the outstanding balance is equal to the present value of future payments. And if you can learn more about present value and time value of money and annuities, you really need to understand that concept before moving on to this. So that's that. If you do not have level payments, if you have non-level payments, then it's possible that a problem could be like, okay, you have actually level principal repayments. You have level principal repayments. So these are actually the same. Now, in this case, these are not the same. We know that the payments are fixed, and as a result, the principal repayments are not fixed. They're going to be decreasing by a factor of 1 plus I, or increasing by a factor of 1 plus I. Again, another thing I want to point out is that interest is always going to be, the interest that's due for each time period is always going to be increasing because the amount that you have paid and the outstanding balance that you have left is going to be decreasing. And you're accumulating interest from the balance that you have. So that's the interest due is going to be decreasing, but the principal repaid is going to be increasing. So at each time step, you're going to be paying more for the original loan amount. And let's see what we have here. Oh, so as I was referring to, what was I referring to? Or be only in case of payments on level. Okay, so I think, oh yeah, this. So if we have level principal payments, that's going to mean that we have an arithmetic decreasing interest payment and that we have an arithmetic decreasing total loan amounts. And so one of the things you really want to draw here is you want to draw out just this entire chart of what was the payment, what's the interest due, what's the principal repaid, what's the outstanding balance. If you can really visualize this chart in every single problem, that's really going to help you understand the relationships between these four different categories, and you can again derive each of the other remaining amounts from knowing and having a visualization of what the information that you have. So level principal payments are going to mean that you have arithmetic decreasing interest, which also means that you're going to have arithmetic decreasing total loan payments. Okay. So now, and again, the way you calculate that, let's say you know that your principal repayments are fixed, then you know the principal repayment columns, you know all of the values there. You can easily calculate the interest due from the previous outstanding balance and the interest rate, and then you can just subtract the two to get your, or you could just add the two, interest due and principal repayment, to get your payment, total loan payment at that time step. And so, right, another equation is at the bottom here. So the total amount of the sum of your payments should equal the total amount that you've paid for interest, and plus the total amount that you've paid for the original loan amount. That should equal the sum of all of your payments. All right, which is obviously we see these individually here, and then if you sum up that's also true, obviously. Okay. And then you really want to visualize each problem. You want to visualize this chart. This chart is actually very helpful. And you always want to go back to the time value of money. You always want to understand these fundamental core principles that I listed out here. Payment equals interest due plus principal repaid. Interest due equals interest rate times previous outstanding balance. Outstanding balance at time t equals outstanding balance, previous outstanding balance minus the principal amount that was repaid. And then yeah, know these formulas as well, especially in the case where you do have level payments. You can use these formulas to your advantage. Again, one of the main like structural understandings here is really understanding these four ideas here about okay, what's common between both level and non-level payments, and you can use this through pretty much all of your loan payment problems. Is understanding the time value of money and annuities, and really applying those concepts that you learn in time value of money, accumulating, discounting, getting to present value, like manipulating annuities, doing complex annuities. Bringing them back to present value, and really, if you just have a complex a nuanced understanding and a firm understanding of annuities and time value of money, you can apply those to these loan problems as well. So I think that's pretty much it. One of the main things is you want to really understand the relationships between these equations. So one of the relationships was, RVN to RVN minus one to RVN minus T minus one. The principal amount is going to increase by a factor of one plus I at each time step. The outstanding balance is going to decrease by the principal repayment. The sum of the interest due and principal repayments is the payment amount. And you also want to understand like these items that are both constant for level and non-level payments. So once you have sort of this understanding, this conceptual understanding that I've laid down here, you can apply these to any sort of loan problems. And as I mentioned in the beginning, like the fundamental understanding here is that each payment is categorized into interest, the payment for interest, and the payment for the payment that you're making for the original loan amount. So that's loans in a nutshell. And again, high level, I really think that this comes down to knowing annuities, knowing the relationships between these equations really well, knowing this chart and how and some of the key fundamental concepts that apply for both non-level and level payments. So once you have a good understanding of that, you will be able to solve any annuities problems. And you really want to break it down into simple versions of the problems that you've seen before. You really want to draw out timelines, draw out time diagrams, especially this chart as well. So those are just some tips that will help you in this topic. So that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.